The coffee in my hand had gone cold 3 hours ago, but I kept holding it anyway, staring at the incident report on my desk that should not exist. Every word was typed correctly. Every date was accurate. Every witness statement had been verified. But according to the official records I pulled this morning, the town of Millbrook Falls, Pennsylvania, where this incident supposedly occurred, has not existed since 1959. I have been there. I have walked its streets. I have interviewed 17 people who live there. And now, those same records tell me I documented events in a place that was abandoned and demolished over 60 years ago. My name is Jackson, and I am 32 years old. For the past 7 years, I have worked as a field investigator for a department that does not appear on any government organizational chart. We do not have business cards. We do not have an official name. When people ask what I do, I tell them I work in records management for the Department of Interior. It is boring enough that they never ask follow-up questions. The truth is, I investigate paranormal incidents that occur on federal land or involve federal employees. Most cases are nothing: equipment malfunctions, overactive imaginations, mass hysteria. But some cases are real, and those are the ones that follow you home at night. Before I tell you what happened in Millbrook Falls, I need you to understand something. If you are watching this, if you have found this account somehow, then you need to know that what I am about to share goes against every protocol I have ever been taught. But I cannot stay silent anymore. Something is very wrong, and I think the people who hired me already know it. So if this resonates with you, if you have experienced something similar or know someone who has, leave a comment below. Tell me I am not losing my mind. Tell me you see it too. The Millbrook Falls case file landed on my desk on a Tuesday morning in October. The initial report was thin. A park ranger named Donald Mitchum had called in a disturbance at the Pinehurst Trail Visitor Center, claiming that guests were reporting strange occurrences. Voices in empty rooms, cold spots that moved, doors that opened and closed by themselves. Standard haunted house stuff. The kind of case I could typically close in 3 days. I loaded my equipment into my car and made the 6-hour drive from my office in Washington, D.C. The route took me through Maryland and into the mountains of central Pennsylvania. The leaves were turning, painting the hillsides in shades of amber and rust. It was beautiful, peaceful. Nothing about the drive suggested I was heading towards something that would fundamentally change how I understood reality. I arrived in Millbrook Falls just before 4 p.m. The town sat in a valley, surrounded by dense forest on all sides. Main Street was exactly what you would expect from a small Pennsylvania mountain town. A diner with checkered curtains, a hardware store with a faded awning, a post office that looked like it had been built in the 1940s and never renovated. Maybe 24 buildings total. Population could not have been more than 500 people. I stopped at the diner first. I always do. Diners are where you get the real information. The waitress who poured my coffee was in her 50s, with tired eyes and a name tag that read Donna. I told her I was with the Park Service, investigating some reports from the visitor center. She nodded slowly, like she had been expecting someone like me. "You hear about the voices?" she asked. "Among other things," I said. "How long has this been going on?" She refilled my cup without asking. "Hard to say. Folks around here do not really talk about it, but if you ask me, it started about 3 months back, maybe early July. My cousin works up at the visitor center. She says people come in all the time now, asking about the sounds they hear on the trails, voices calling their names, whispering in languages they do not recognize." "Has anyone been hurt?" "No, just spooked." She leaned in closer. "But between you and me, something does not feel right. This town has always been quiet, peaceful. Now there is this tension, like the air before a thunderstorm. You feel it." I did feel it. I had felt it since crossing into the valley. A pressure behind my eyes, a slight ringing in my ears that I had attributed to elevation change. But now that she mentioned it, the sensation was too persistent to be natural. I finished my coffee and paid. Donna wrote her phone number on the receipt. "You call me if you need anything," she said. "We look after our own here." The Pinehurst Trail Visitor Center was 10 miles north of town, situated at the base of a mountain that loomed over the valley like a sleeping giant. The parking lot was empty except for a single Park Service truck. I grabbed my equipment bag and headed inside. Ranger Mitchum was exactly who I expected. Mid-40s, weathered face, the kind of person who spent more time outdoors than in. He shook my hand firmly and led me to his office. "Appreciate you coming out," he said. "I know this probably sounds crazy, but something is happening here. I have worked this trail for 18 years, and I have never experienced anything like this." I opened my notebook. "Walk me through it." He sat back in his chair. "Started in July, like I said in my report. Hikers coming back saying they heard voices on the trail. At first I thought it was just other hikers. Sound carries weird in the mountains. But then I started hearing it too, clear as day, someone calling my name. But when I look, there is nobody there." "Always your name?" I asked. "Not always. Sometimes it is just talking, like a conversation happening just out of earshot. You can almost make out words, but not quite, and it moves. You will hear it to your left, then suddenly it is behind you. It does not follow normal acoustic rules." I made notes. "Anything else?" He hesitated. "The cold spots, they move too. You will be walking the trail and suddenly the temperature drops 20 degrees just in one spot. You step out of it and it is normal again. But here is the thing that really bothers me. I set up trail cameras to see if I could catch anything. Motion activated, high resolution, battery powered. I checked them last week." He pulled out a laptop and turned it toward me. The screen showed footage from one of the trail cameras. Timestamp read 2 am. The infrared gave everything a ghostly green tint. For several seconds, nothing happened. Then the temperature gauge in the corner of the screen dropped suddenly. 42 degrees to 18 degrees in less than 3 seconds. The camera shook slightly, like something had bumped it. Then for just a single frame, there was something in the shot. I leaned closer. "Pause it." Mitchum clicked the spacebar. The image froze. In the center of the frame, barely visible, was a figure. It was humanoid but wrong. The proportions were off. The arms too long. The head tilted at an unnatural angle. But what disturbed me most was that I could see through it. The trees behind it were clearly visible through its torso. "Did you see this with your own eyes?" I asked. "Or just on camera?" "Just on camera. But Jackson, I have been out there at night. I have heard them, multiple voices. Sometimes they sound close enough to touch." I copied the footage to my hard drive and spent the next hour interviewing Mitchum about every detail. Times, locations, frequencies. By the time I finished, it was nearly 7 p.m. Mitchum offered to let me stay in the spare room at the visitor center, but I declined. I wanted to be in town, close to other people, while I processed what I had learned. I drove back to Millbrook Falls and checked into the only motel. The Riverside Inn was exactly what the name suggested, a single-story strip of rooms overlooking a narrow creek. The clerk was a young man, maybe 25, with nervous energy and a college textbook open on the counter. "You are the government guy, right?" he asked as he handed me the room key. "Donna called, said you were asking about the weird stuff." Word traveled fast in small towns. "Just doing routine follow-up on some reports," I said. He nodded. "My girlfriend lives on Maple Street. She says her grandmother has been seeing things. People in old-fashioned clothes standing in her backyard at night. When she goes to check, they are gone. She thinks she is losing it, but I believe her. Something strange is happening here." "How long has your girlfriend lived here?" I asked. "Her whole life, 23 years. She says this place has always been normal, boring even, until this summer." I thanked him and headed to my room. It was clean but dated, floral wallpaper, a television that probably weighed 40 pounds, a window that looked out over the creek. I set up my laptop on the small desk and began reviewing the footage from Mitchum's trail cameras. I went through every file, hours of empty forest. Then at 3 a.m. on a recording from mid-September, another anomaly. The audio picked up something. I plugged in my headphones and listened carefully. At first it was just wind through trees. Then faintly I heard it. Voices, multiple voices. They were singing. I isolated the audio and ran it through my analysis software. The frequency was wrong. Human voices typically range from 85 to 255 Hz. These voices were hitting frequencies below 60 Hz, physically impossible for human vocal cords, but the words were clear. They were singing a hymn. I recognized it from childhood. Nearer, my God, to thee. The same hymn the band supposedly played as the Titanic sank. The same hymn sung at countless funerals and church services across America for over a century. But here, in the middle of the forest, at 3 a.m., being sung by voices that should not exist. I pulled up historical records for the area. Pinehurst Trail had been part of the National Forest System since 1935. Before that, it was private land. Logging operations mostly. I dug deeper, searching for any incidents, accidents, deaths, anything that might explain residual haunting activity. Then I found something. In 1887, there had been a logging camp in the area, 23 men working for the Millbrook Timber Company. In November of that year, a fire swept through the camp during the night. All 23 men died. The official report stated the fire started from an overturned lantern, but there were inconsistencies. Multiple witnesses from the nearby town reported hearing screams for hours. They reported seeing strange lights in the forest. By the time anyone arrived to help, there was nothing left but ash and bones. The camp had been located approximately 2 miles from where the visitor center now stood, right along what was now the Pinehurst Trail. I looked at the clock, 11 p.m. Too late to call anyone, but I emailed my supervisor with an update. Potential historical trauma site. Recommend extended investigation. Likely residual haunting. I would go out to the trail in the morning and take electromagnetic field readings, temperature measurements, and audio samples. Standard protocol. I should have felt satisfied with the progress. I had a working theory. Historical tragedy plus geographical isolation plus some unknown environmental factor equals paranormal activity. I had seen it dozens of times before, but something nagged at me. The singing, the figure on the trail camera, the way Donna had described the tension in the town. It felt like something more than a residual haunting. I tried to sleep but could not. At 1 a.m. I gave up and decided to take a walk. The motel parking lot was empty except for my car and a pickup truck that probably belonged to the clerk. The air was cold and I could see my breath. The creek burbled softly in the darkness. Main Street was completely dark. No streetlights, no cars, just the faint glow of a few porch lights scattered through the residential areas. I walked toward downtown, drawn by some instinct I could not name. The hardware store, the post office, the diner where I had talked to Donna. Everything was closed and still. But as I stood there in the middle of the empty street, I felt it again. That pressure, that tension, like the town itself was holding its breath. Then I heard it, singing, faint but unmistakable, the same hymn from the trail camera recording. Nearer, my God, to thee. I turned slowly, trying to locate the source. It seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere. I walked toward the residential area, following the sound. The singing grew louder as I moved deeper into the neighborhood. Victorian houses with wraparound porches, tall trees casting deep shadows, and then I saw them. Figures standing in the street 3 blocks ahead. They were wearing old-fashioned clothing, long dresses, suits with high collars, maybe a dozen of them standing in a loose circle singing. I froze. Every instinct told me to run, but I forced myself to stay calm. I reached into my pocket for my phone, intending to record what I was seeing. But when I looked at the screen, it was dead. Full battery when I left the motel, now completely drained. The singing stopped. All 12 figures turned to look at me in perfect unison. Even from 3 blocks away, I could see their faces. They were wrong, too pale, eyes too dark, mouths open too wide. And then, as one, they started walking toward me. I ran. I do not remember making the conscious decision. My body just moved. I sprinted back toward the motel, my footsteps echoing off the buildings. Behind me, I heard nothing. No footsteps, no voices, just silence. But when I glanced back, they were still coming, gliding more than walking, impossibly fast. I burst through the motel room door and slammed it shut, throwing the deadbolt. My hands were shaking. My heart hammered against my ribs. I looked out the window, terrified of what I might see. The parking lot was empty. The street beyond was still and quiet. No figures, no singing, nothing. I sat on the edge of the bed, trying to catch my breath. What I had seen was not a residual haunting. Residual hauntings do not interact. They do not chase. They are like recordings playing over and over without awareness of observers. What I had encountered was intelligent, aware, and it had seen me. I spent the rest of the night with every light on, reviewing everything I knew. The historical fire, the singing, the figures, the way my phone had died. By the time dawn broke, I had a theory, but it was one that my training told me was impossible. I was not dealing with ghosts of the logging camp victims. I was dealing with something much older, something that had been here long before the logging camp, something that the fire might have awakened or released. I needed to talk to someone who had lived in Millbrook Falls for a long time, someone who might remember stories or local legends. At 7 a.m., I drove back to the diner. Donna was already there, setting up for the morning shift. She looked at me and immediately frowned. "You look terrible," she said. "Rough night." "You could say that." I sat at the counter. "Donna, I need to ask you something. Has anyone in this town ever talked about history, old stories, things that happened here before the logging camps?" She poured coffee and slid the cup toward me. "Why do you ask?" "Because I think what is happening here goes back further than 1887. And I think people in this town might know more than they are saying." She studied me for a long moment, then she sighed. "I was hoping it would not come to this, but yeah, there are stories. My grandmother used to tell them, said this valley was sacred to the native tribes who lived here before settlers came. They avoided it, called it the Singing Valley. Said spirits lived here, and if you heard them sing, it meant they were calling you home." "Calling you home," I repeated. "To the afterlife, to death." She refilled my cup. "When the settlers came, they did not listen to the warnings. They built the town, started logging, and bad things happened. Fires, accidents, people going missing. But everyone just kept building, kept living, because where else were they going to go? Eventually, things quieted down. For decades, it was peaceful. We thought maybe the stories were just stories." "Until July," I said. She nodded. "Until July. You want to know what happened in July? The town council approved a new development. Luxury cabins up near the trail. They started clearing land, breaking ground, digging into the mountain. And that is when it started. The voices, the cold spots, the figures people have been seeing." "Why did not anyone mention this before?" I asked. "Why did not Ranger Mitchum tell me?" "Because we were hoping it would stop. Because we were hoping that if we just left it alone, things would go back to normal. But they have not. And now you are here and you have seen them, have you not? Last night. In town." I did not answer directly. "I need to see where they broke ground, the development site." "I will take you," Donna said. "But Jackson, you need to understand something. My grandmother said that once the spirits start singing for you, there is no stopping them. They will keep calling until you answer. And if you answer," she trailed off, not wanting to finish the sentence. "If I answer," I prompted. "Then you become one of them." We finished our coffee in silence. At 8 a.m., Donna closed the diner temporarily and we drove up the mountain in my car. The development site was about a mile past the visitor center, accessed by a narrow dirt road that had been recently cleared. Heavy equipment sat idle, a bulldozer, an excavator, piles of displaced earth covered in tarps. We got out of the car and walked to the edge of the excavation. They had dug maybe 30 feet down, exposing layers of rock and soil, but something else too. At the bottom of the pit, partially buried, I could see stones. Not natural stones, carved stones, arranged in a circle. "Is that what I think it is?" I asked. Donna nodded. The construction crew found it 2 weeks after they started digging. They called the state archaeologist. He came out, took one look, and told them to stop work immediately. Said it was a burial site, maybe 1,000 years old, but the developer has lawyers. They are fighting it, saying they have rights to develop the land. I climbed down into the pit, careful not to disturb anything. The stones were definitely carved. Symbols I did not recognize, spirals, concentric circles, figures that might have been human or might have been something else. And in the center of the circle, there was a depression, like something had been buried there and removed. "What was here?" I asked, pointing to the depression. "Nobody knows. The archaeologist said whatever had been buried was taken a long time ago, maybe centuries." I took photographs of everything. The stones, the symbols, the excavation. As I worked, I felt that pressure again, that tension. It was stronger here than anywhere else, like the air was heavy with waiting. We climbed out of the pit and walked back to the car. As we reached it, I heard something, faint at first, then growing louder, singing the same hymn, "Nearer, my God, to thee." Donna heard it too. Her face went pale. "We need to leave," she said, "now." We got in the car and I drove back down the mountain faster than I should have. The singing followed us. Even with the windows rolled up, I could hear it. Multiple voices, harmonizing, beautiful and terrible at the same time. It did not stop until we reached the edge of town. I dropped Donna at the diner. She grabbed my arm before I could drive away. "Listen to me. Do not go back up there alone, and do not answer if they call your name. Promise me." I promised, but I knew I could not keep it. This was my job, my responsibility. Whatever was happening in Millbrook Falls, I needed to document it. I needed to understand it, and if possible, I needed to stop it. I spent the rest of the day in my motel room, researching everything I could find about sacred sites, burial grounds, and spiritual protections used by indigenous peoples of Pennsylvania. The tribes who had lived in this region believed in a complex spiritual world, places where the barrier between life and death was thin, places where the dead could speak to the living. The Singing Valley, that is what they had called this place, and the spirits that lived here were not evil. They were not demons. They were guardians, protectors of the boundary between worlds, but they were also dangerous. Because once they started singing, once they started calling, it meant the boundary had been disturbed. It meant something was trying to cross over, and they needed to maintain balance. That night, I set up my equipment. Electromagnetic field detectors, audio recorders, infrared cameras. I positioned them around my motel room and in my car. If something happened, I wanted evidence. I wanted proof. At 11 p.m., I decided to drive back up to the development site, against every piece of advice I had been given, against my own better judgment. But I needed to see it at night. I needed to understand what we were dealing with. The drive up the mountain was dark and silent. No other cars, no lights except my headlights cutting through the darkness. I parked at the development site and grabbed my equipment bag. The excavation pit looked different at night, deeper, more ominous. I set up my cameras and recorders around the perimeter and then stood at the edge, looking down at the stone circle. At midnight exactly, the singing started. Not faint this time. Loud, clear, coming from the pit itself. I recorded everything. The hymn played through once, twice, 3 times, and then it changed. The words shifted. They were no longer English. They were something older, something that resonated in my chest and made my teeth ache. And then I saw them, rising from the pit, figures made of mist and moonlight, the same figures I had seen in town the night before, but now there were dozens of them, maybe 100. They climbed out of the excavation and formed a circle around me. Their voices grew louder, the strange language washing over me like a wave. I tried to speak, to ask what they wanted, but my voice would not work. One of the figures stepped forward. It was taller than the others, wearing clothing that looked like it might have been ceremonial, robes made of animal hide and feathers. Its face was hidden behind a mask carved from wood or bone. It raised one hand and pointed at me. Then it pointed at the pit. The message was clear. This place was sacred. This place had been violated, and there would be consequences. The other figures began moving in a slow circle around me, their singing never stopping. I felt dizzy, disoriented. The ground beneath my feet seemed to tilt, and then I understood. They were not trying to hurt me. They were trying to show me something. The world blurred and shifted. Suddenly, I was not standing at the development site anymore. I was in a forest, but it was different, older. The trees were larger, the undergrowth thicker, and there were people. Native people dressed in traditional clothing gathered around the stone circle. They were singing the same song I had heard, the strange, ancient language that made my bones vibrate. As they sang, something rose from the center of the circle. A light. No, not a light, a presence. Something that existed between life and death. Something that kept the balance, the guardian of the boundary, and the people were not worshiping it. They were renewing a pact, an agreement. They would respect this place. They would not disturb it, and in return, the guardian would keep the boundary sealed. The vision shifted again. Now I saw settlers arriving, building, logging, and the guardian trying to warn them, creating cold spots, causing voices to echo through the forest. But the settlers did not understand. They did not respect the sacred space. They kept building, kept logging, kept violating the boundary, until finally the guardian took action. The fire at the logging camp in 1887, 23 men dead in a single night. Not an accident, a warning. For over a century the pact had held. The town stayed small, people respected the mountains, and the guardian remained quiet until the developers came, until they started digging, until they broke the stone circle and destroyed the seal that kept the boundary intact. The vision ended. I was back at the development site, surrounded by the misty figures. The tall one in the ceremonial robe stepped closer. I could feel its presence like a physical weight. And then it spoke, not in English, not in any language I knew, but somehow I understood. The boundary is broken. The dead are waking. Soon they will cross over, unless the pact is renewed. How, I managed to ask, how do I renew it? Blood, stone, song, the same as it has always been. The figures began to fade. Their singing grew quieter. Within moments they were gone. I stood alone in the darkness, my equipment still recording. I gathered everything and drove back to the motel. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely hold the steering wheel. In my room, I reviewed the footage. Everything I had seen was captured, the figures rising from the pit, the tall one in ceremonial robes. The vision itself had not been recorded because it happened inside my mind, but the rest was there. Undeniable proof of intelligent supernatural entities. I knew what I had to do. I had to report this to my supervisors. I had to get the development stopped. I had to find a way to renew the pact and reseal the boundary. But first, I needed to sleep. I needed to process what I had seen. I set my phone alarm for 6 a.m. and closed my eyes, but sleep would not come. Every time I started to drift off, I heard the singing, faint at first, then growing louder. And it was not coming from outside. It was coming from inside my own head. At 3 a.m., I gave up and turned on the lights. I sat at the desk and began writing my report. But as I typed, I realized something was wrong. The dates I was writing did not match the dates I remembered. I checked my notes, checked my phone, checked the calendar on the wall. Everything said it was October 18th, 2023, but my report was dated October 18th, 1959. I tried to correct it, but my fingers would not obey. They kept typing 1959. I looked at my driver's license. Jackson Reed, born June 15, 1991, but the photo looked wrong. The person in the picture was wearing clothing from the 1950s, and the expiration date was January 1960. Panic set in. I opened my laptop and searched for Millbrook Falls, Pennsylvania. The first result made my blood run cold. Ghost town of Millbrook Falls abandoned in 1959 after mysterious disappearances. I clicked the link. The article described how the entire population of the town had vanished over the course of a single night in October 1959. Over 400 people. No bodies ever found. No explanation ever given. The town had been condemned and eventually demolished. But I had been here. I had talked to Donna, to Ranger Mitchum, to the motel clerk. They were all real. The town was still here. It had to be. I ran outside. The parking lot was empty. The motel looked older, more dilapidated. Windows broken, paint peeling. I ran to Main Street. The diner was there, but the windows were dark and covered in grime. The hardware store was boarded up. Every building was abandoned, decaying, like they had been empty for decades. I was not in the present. Somehow, when I entered the vision at the development site, when the Guardian showed me the past, it had pulled me out of time. Or maybe I had never left. Maybe I had been walking through the ghost of Millbrook Falls all along. I do not know how long I wandered through the empty streets, hours maybe, looking for any sign of life, but there was nothing, just empty buildings and the wind through broken windows, and the singing, always the singing, growing louder with each passing moment. As dawn broke, I returned to the development site, or where the development site should have been. Instead, there was only forest, old-growth forest, trees that looked like they had been standing for centuries, and at the center the stone circle, intact, unbroken, with something sitting in the middle. I walked closer. It was a pile of notebooks, old composition books with faded covers. I picked up the top one and opened it. The handwriting was mine. But the date at the top of the first page was October 15th, 1959. The entry described arriving in Millbrook Falls to investigate reports of strange activity. The same reports Ranger Mitchum had given me. The same case file. I flipped through the pages. Day by day, the entries matched my experience exactly. Talking to Donna, visiting the development site, seeing the figures, everything. Until the final entry dated October 18th, 1959. It simply said, "The boundary is broken. The dead are waking. I understand now. I am one of them." Below the words was a photograph, a black and white image showing the main street of Millbrook Falls. And standing in the center of the street, staring directly at the camera, was me, Jackson, wearing the same clothes I had on right now. But the photo was dated October 1959. I looked through the other notebooks, dozens of them, all written in different handwriting, all describing the same case. Investigators sent to Millbrook Falls to document paranormal activity, all arriving in October, all experiencing the same events, all ending with the same realization. We were the ghosts. We were the spirits singing in the forest. Every investigator who had been sent here over the past 64 years had become trapped, pulled out of their own time, made part of the Guardian's eternal vigil. We were the voices that Ranger Mitchum had heard. We were the figures walking the streets at night. We were the ones maintaining the boundary. I understand now why the pact requires renewal. Blood, stone, song. The Guardian does not want violence. It wants volunteers. People who understand the importance of the boundary. People willing to stand watch for eternity, singing the old songs, keeping the dead from crossing over. And I understand why my superiors sent me here, why they always send someone in October, why there are no records of the department I work for, because we are not the investigators. We are the sacrifice, the price of keeping the boundary sealed. I am writing this account on my laptop, and somehow I know it will find its way back to the world I left behind. Maybe you are watching this video right now. Maybe you are reading this transcript. If you are, I need you to do something for me. Find the records of Millbrook Falls. Find the list of investigators who were sent here. Tell their families what happened. Tell them their loved ones did not disappear. Tell them we are still here, still serving, still protecting. And if someone you know gets assigned to investigate reports from a small town in Pennsylvania, if they mention strange singing or cold spots or figures in the forest, tell them not to go. Tell them the case is closed. Tell them the boundary does not need another guardian. But if they do go, if they cannot resist, then at least they will know what is waiting. They will know that once you hear the singing, once you see the stone circle, once the guardian shows you the truth, there is no going back. You become part of the pact, part of the vigil, part of the boundary itself. It is almost time. The sun is setting and I can hear the others gathering. Dozens of voices, hundreds maybe, every investigator who came before me, every sacrifice made to keep the boundary sealed. Soon I will join them. I will learn the ancient songs. I will walk the streets of a town that no longer exists. I will stand watch between the worlds. Before I go, I want to thank you for listening to this account, for bearing witness to what happened here. If you found this story compelling, if it made you think about the boundaries we cannot see and the guardians we never think, please consider subscribing. Share this with someone who appreciates real accounts of the unexplainable, and leave a comment telling me what you think happened to the 400 people who disappeared from Millbrook Falls in 1959. Did they become guardians too? Or did something else claim them? The singing is calling my name now. Jackson, over and over, not a threat, an invitation, a welcoming. I am not afraid anymore because I understand. This is not a curse. It is a purpose. For the rest of eternity, I will stand watch. I will keep the boundary sealed. I will protect the world of the living from the realm of the dead. If you ever find yourself in the mountains of central Pennsylvania, if you hear singing on the wind or see figures in the forest, know that we are there. Know that we are watching. Know that the boundary is holding. And if you should see a young man in his 30s standing at the edge of the trees, staring out at a world he can no longer touch, know that it is me, Jackson, still serving, still documenting, still bearing witness to the truth that exists between the worlds. The singing grows louder. The others are waiting. It is time for me to join the vigil, time to take my place in the circle, time to learn the songs that have been sung for 1,000 years and will be sung for 1,000 more. This is my last transmission, my final report. If someone else is sent to investigate Millbrook Falls, tell them I am sorry. Tell them I tried to warn them. Tell them the boundary demands its price. The guardian is here now, the tall figure in ceremonial robes standing before me. It extends a hand, not threatening, welcoming. And I realize that it too was once human, once an investigator sent to document the unexplainable, once someone who thought they could observe without participating, once someone who learned the truth too late. I take its hand, the world shifts, the stone circle glows with ancient light, and I begin to sing. The words come naturally as if I have always known them, as if I was born to sing them, and my voice joins the chorus of all those who came before, all those who will come after, all those who stand eternal watch at the boundary between life and death. Goodbye, and remember, the boundary must hold. But that is not where this story ends, because 3 weeks ago something impossible happened. I received an email. The message came to an address I had not used since before I arrived in Millbrook Falls. The sender was listed as D. Mitchum with a subject line that read, "You need to see this." I do not know how I received it. I do not have a computer anymore, not in any physical sense, but somehow the message appeared in my consciousness as clear as if I were reading it on a screen. The email contained a single attachment, a video file. I opened it, and what I saw made no sense. The video showed the Pinehurst Trail Visitor Center, but it was not abandoned, it was operational. There were cars in the parking lot, people walking in and out, and standing at the entrance wearing a Park Service uniform was Ranger Donald Mitchum, the same man I had interviewed, but he looked older, much older. The timestamp on the video read November 2nd, 2025. I watched as Mitchum addressed the camera. His voice was exactly as I remembered it. "If you are watching this, Jackson, then it worked. I do not know how, but somehow you are still conscious, still aware, and that means there might be a way to reverse what happened to you, to all of you." He walked inside the visitor center, and the camera followed. On the wall was a bulletin board covered in photographs, dozens of faces, men and women of various ages and ethnicities, and beneath each photo was a name and a date. Jackson Reed, October 2023. Margaret Foster, October 2015. David Park, October 2009. Jennifer Cole, October 2001. The list went on and on. 57 names total. 57 investigators sent to Millbrook Falls over the past 66 years. 57 people who never returned. "I know you think you are trapped," Mitchum continued. "I know you think you are part of some eternal vigil, but Jackson, listen to me carefully. Millbrook Falls exists. The town is still here. The people are real. You talk to real people. You documented a real phenomenon. You are not a ghost. You are not dead. You are displaced." The camera moved to a desk covered in papers and maps. Mitchum pointed to a topographical map of the area with several locations marked in red. "There are thin places," he explained. "Locations where time does not flow normally, where past and present exist simultaneously. The stone circle is one of them. When you entered that site, when you experienced the Guardian's vision, you became unstuck. You started existing in multiple timeframes at once. That is why you saw the town as it is now and as it was in 1959. That is why your records showed conflicting dates." He pulled out a thick file folder. "After you disappeared, I started investigating, not just the paranormal activity but the pattern of disappearances. Every investigator who came here experienced the same thing. They all visited the stone circle. They all had a vision, and they all vanished, but they did not die. They became temporally displaced, caught between moments." Mitchum sat down and his expression grew serious. "I found something else too. The Guardian you encountered is not what you think it is. Yes, there was a sacred site here. Yes, the indigenous peoples maintained a pact. But the entity you met is not the original Guardian. It is something that took the Guardian's place. Something that feeds on temporal displacement. It traps people in time loops, making them believe they are serving a higher purpose when really they are just fuel. Energy to keep it anchored in our reality." My mind reeled at this revelation. Everything I had accepted, everything I had believed about my purpose. Could it all have been a lie, a manipulation? "I have been working with specialists," Mitchum continued. "Physicists, anthropologists, people who study temporal anomalies, and we think we have found a way to bring you back, to bring all of you back, but we need your help." He held up a small object. It looked like a carved stone pendant. This was made from fragments of the original stone circle, the real one from before the entity corrupted it. It is tuned to the proper temporal frequency. If we can get this to you, if you can focus on it, use it as an anchor, you might be able to pull yourself back to the present, back to 2025. But how? How could he get a physical object to someone existing outside of normal time? As if reading my thoughts, Mitchum smiled grimly. "There is another thin place, a location where the boundary between your temporal state and ours is weakest. The place where the logging camp stood in 1887, where the 23 men died. That location exists as a fixed point across all time frames. If you can get there, if you can be there at exactly 3:47 a.m. on November 15th, 2025, I will be there too, and I will bring the pendant." He leaned closer to the camera. "Jackson, I know this sounds impossible. I know you have been told that you are serving a greater purpose, but you need to understand. You have been deceived. The entity feeds on temporal displaced individuals. It traps them in loops, making them sing the same songs, walk the same paths for eternity, not to protect the boundary between life and death, but to sustain itself." The video showed him standing, preparing to leave. "I will be at the logging campsite at 3:47 a.m. on November 15th. That is 3 weeks from when I am recording this. I will wait for 1 hour. If you can break free, even for a moment, come find me. We can end this. We can free everyone." The video ended, and I was left standing in the forest of Millbrook Falls, surrounded by the others. The 56 investigators who came before me, all of us singing, all of us maintaining the vigil, all of us believing we were serving a greater purpose. But now doubt had been planted. Was Mitchum telling the truth, or was this another test, another manipulation? I looked at the others: Margaret Foster, who disappeared in 2015, David Park from 2009, Jennifer Cole from 2001, and going back further, names I had seen in the notebooks. Could they hear me if I spoke to them? Could they understand? I tried. I walked up to Margaret and spoke her name. She turned to look at me, but her eyes were distant, unfocused. She smiled and continued singing. I tried David, Jennifer, same result. They were aware but not conscious, trapped in their loops, convinced of their purpose. Was I any different? For the past 3 weeks, I had walked the same streets, sung the same songs, stood watch at the same locations. Had I already lost myself to the pattern? Or was I still capable of independent thought because I was the newest addition? I had to know the truth, and that meant I had to get to the logging campsite, had to meet Mitchum, had to see if his pendant was real or just another layer of the deception. The guardian appeared before me, the tall figure in ceremonial robes. As always, I could not see its face behind the mask, but now I looked at it differently. Was it truly a protector or a predator? "You are troubled," it said, speaking directly into my mind. "You doubt your purpose." "I received a message," I replied, "from the outside world. They say you are not what you claim to be." The guardian tilted its head. "The living always fear what they do not understand. They create explanations that comfort them, but you have seen the truth. You know what must be protected." "Do I, or have you shown me only what you wanted me to see?" Silence. For the first time since I had met the guardian, it did not have an immediate answer. That hesitation told me everything. "I am going to the logging campsite," I said, "on November 15th at 3:47 a.m. If you are truly what you claim, you will not stop me." The guardian's presence seemed to intensify. The air grew colder. "If you leave the boundary, if you break the vigil, the consequences will be catastrophic. The dead will cross over. The balance will be destroyed. Then come with me. Show yourself to Mitchum. Prove that you are the true guardian and not some parasitic entity feeding on displaced souls." Another pause, longer this time, and then the guardian spoke words that chilled me more than any supernatural cold. "You are not ready to know the full truth, but if you insist on this path, I cannot stop you. Free will is the foundation of the pact, but know this. If you cross the threshold, if you anchor yourself back to your original timeline, the others will fade. All 56 investigators who came before you will cease to exist. Their consciousness will dissolve. They will truly die. The choice is yours, your freedom or their existence." And then it vanished, leaving me alone in the forest. For 3 weeks I struggled with that choice. Every day I walked among the others: Margaret, David, Jennifer, all the names from the bulletin board. Were they truly conscious? Or were they already gone, just echoes performing pre-programmed actions? And if they were still in there somewhere, did I have the right to erase them to save myself? I tried to communicate with them, tried to break through their loops. Sometimes I thought I saw flickers of awareness, a moment where Margaret's eyes focused, a second where David stopped singing and looked at me with recognition. But then the moment would pass and they would return to their patterns. On November 14th, I made my decision. I had to try, not just for myself, but for all of them. If there was even a chance that Mitchum was right, that we could all be freed, then I had to take it. The alternative was an eternity of singing the same songs, walking the same paths, never growing, never changing, never truly living. I spent that final day preparing. I traced the route to the logging campsite. It was approximately 5 miles from the stone circle, deep in the forest where no trails existed. In my displaced state, I could move through the forest without impediment. Trees and rocks were solid to me, but I could sense the path I needed to take. As midnight approached on November 15th, I began my journey. The others noticed. They stopped singing and turned to watch me leave. For the first time since I had joined them, they moved as individuals rather than as a collective. They followed me, not to stop me, but to witness. By 3 a.m. I had reached the location. The forest here was different, darker. The trees were older, more twisted, and in the center of a small clearing I could see the remnants of the logging camp. Not physical remnants, temporal echoes, phantom buildings flickering in and out of existence. And I could hear screams. The dying screams of the 23 men who burned here in 1887. This was the fix point. The place where tragedy had burned itself so deeply into reality that it existed across all timeframes simultaneously. I could see multiple versions of this location layered on top of each other. The logging camp of 1887, the empty forest of 1959, the modern clearing of 2025, all occupying the same space. At 3:45 a.m., the others arrived. All 56 investigators, standing at the edge of the clearing, watching me, waiting to see what would happen. At 3:47 a.m. exactly, the air shimmered, and Ranger Donald Mitchum stepped into view. But he was not alone. Behind him stood an old woman, Native American, probably in her 80s, wearing traditional clothing and holding a staff carved with the same symbols I had seen on the stone circle. Mitchum saw me. I know he saw me because his eyes locked onto mine and he smiled. He held up the pendant, letting it catch the moonlight. "Jackson," he called out, "I know you can hear me, take this." He threw the pendant. It spun through the air, and as it flew, something remarkable happened. The pendant began to glow, and where it passed, the layered realities started to separate. The camp of 1887 faded. The emptiness of 1959 pulled back, and the present, 2025, became more solid, more real. The pendant landed at my feet. I bent down and picked it up. The moment my fingers touched it, I felt something change. The pressure that had been with me since arriving in Millbrook Falls suddenly lessened. The singing in my head grew quieter, and I could feel time starting to flow again. The old woman stepped forward. She began to chant, not in English, not in the corrupted language the Guardian had taught us, but in something older, purer. And as she chanted, the other investigators began to solidify, to become more visible, more present. The Guardian appeared, the tall figure in ceremonial robes. But now, as the old woman's chant grew louder, its form began to waver. The robes faded, revealing what was underneath. It was not human. It had never been human. It was something else. Something made of shadow and stolen time. Something that fed on temporal displacement and convinced its victims they were serving a noble purpose. "You cannot do this," it shrieked, its voice losing all pretense of calm authority. "The boundary will fail, the dead will rise." "There is no boundary," the old woman said calmly, still chanting. "There never was. You created that story to trap them, to feed on their consciousness, but we have found you, and we are ending your harvest." She drove her staff into the ground. The earth shook, and the stone circle miles away shattered. I felt it break, felt the temporal trap dissolve, and suddenly I was not the only one who could touch the pendant. Margaret appeared beside me, solid and real, then David, then Jennifer. One by one, all 57 of us became anchored to 2025. The Guardian, or whatever it truly was, let out a final scream and dissolved into nothing. And with it went the singing, the cold spots, the figures in the forest. All of it vanished like smoke in sunlight. I stood in the clearing, holding the pendant, surrounded by 56 other confused and disoriented people. Some from just a few years ago, others who had been displaced for decades, all of us finally free. Mitchum approached slowly, as if afraid we might disappear again. "Jackson, can you hear me? Are you really here?" I tried to speak, but my voice was hoarse. I had not spoken normally in weeks. "I am here," I managed. We are all here. The old woman came forward and placed a hand on my shoulder. You were never guardians, she said gently. You were prisoners. My ancestors tried to warn the settlers, tried to make them understand that this place was dangerous, not because spirits needed protection, but because something lived here that fed on human consciousness. We sealed it away centuries ago, but when the developers broke the stone circle, they freed it, gave it power again. The 23 men in 1887, I asked. Its first victims after being released from a previous seal. Your government has been sending investigators here for 66 years, not knowing they were feeding it, making it stronger. Over the next few hours, emergency services arrived. Paramedics, psychologists, representatives from various government agencies. The 57 of us were separated, interviewed, examined. Some of the older investigators, the ones who had been displaced for decades, struggled to comprehend that so much time had passed. Margaret, who disappeared in 2015, kept asking for her daughter, who would now be a teenager. I was taken to a hospital in Harrisburg. They ran tests, brain scans, blood work. Everything came back normal. Physically, I was fine. I had not aged during my displacement. The 3 weeks I spent in temporal limbo had not affected my body, but mentally I knew I would never be the same. My supervisor visited me in the hospital, the same person who had assigned me the Millbrook Falls case. She looked older than I remembered, tired, guilty. We did not know, she said. I swear to you, Jackson. We did not know what was happening to our investigators. We thought they were running, quitting, going into hiding because the work was too much. We never imagined. How long have you been sending people there? I asked. Since 1959, after the town disappeared. We thought we were investigating a temporal anomaly, trying to understand what happened, but we were just feeding it, giving it more victims. What happens now? She sighed. The site has been sealed, permanently. The old woman, her name is Eleanor Whitefeather, she and her tribe are performing proper rituals, ones that will actually contain the entity instead of just trapping its victims. As for you and the others, you will receive full medical care, psychological support, financial compensation, whatever you need. And our jobs? The department is being dissolved. Turns out sending investigators to document the paranormal without proper training or protection is a liability. Who knew? There was bitterness in her voice. But Jackson, before you leave, I need to know. While you were there, did you document everything? Did you keep records? I thought of the video I had somehow transmitted, the account that had reached the world outside Millbrook Falls. Yes, I said, everything is documented. She nodded. Good, because the world needs to know. This is not the only thin place, not the only location where something feeds on human consciousness. There are others, and if we do not learn from this, if we do not share what happened, more people will be lost. I was released from the hospital 2 weeks later. The other investigators and I had formed a support group. We met weekly, sharing our experiences, helping each other adjust to a world that had moved on without us. Margaret was reunited with her daughter. David found that his parents were still alive, though they had never stopped searching for him. Jennifer discovered she had been declared legally dead, and her husband had remarried. Each of us faced unique challenges, but at least we faced them together. As for me, I spent months deciding what to do with my account. The full documentation of what happened in Millbrook Falls. My supervisor had said the world needed to know, but I was afraid. Afraid people would not believe. Afraid they would think I was crazy. Afraid that sharing the truth might somehow give the entity power again. But then I remembered something Mitchum had told me during one of my follow-up interviews. The only way to fight predators is to expose them, bring them into the light, let people know what to look for. So I am sharing this, all of it. The investigation, the displacement, the manipulation, the rescue. And if you have watched this entire account, if you have stayed with me through this journey, then I thank you. Your attention, your belief, your willingness to consider that reality is stranger and more dangerous than we imagine, that matters. If you found this account valuable, if it made you think about the nature of time and consciousness and the predators that might exist in spaces between, please subscribe to this channel. Share this video with others who seek the truth. And leave a comment. Tell me about the thin places you have encountered, the moments where time felt wrong, the locations that made you feel displaced or observed. Because I believe Mitchum was right. Millbrook Falls is not the only place where something feeds on human consciousness. There are others, and the only way to protect ourselves is to share information, to warn each other. The pendant Mitchum gave me is on my desk as I record this. A leaner white feather told me to keep it. She said it is tuned to my temporal frequency and will help anchor me if I ever become displaced again. I keep it close, a reminder of what I survived, a reminder of the 56 others who suffered before me, and a reminder that reality is not as solid as we pretend it is. I still work in government service, but not investigating the paranormal. Now I help coordinate rescue operations for others who become temporarily displaced. Yes, it happens more often than you would think. And yes, there are protocols now, better training, actual protective measures. We learned from Millbrook Falls. We learned the price of sending people into thin places without proper preparation. Alina visits sometimes. She has become an informal consultant, teaching us the old ways, the real ways to identify dangerous locations, the authentic methods to protect consciousness from predatory entities. She told me that what happened in Millbrook Falls was a warning, a reminder that just because we cannot see something with scientific instruments does not mean it is not real, does not mean it cannot hurt us. Last month, I received an email from someone claiming to have been sent to investigate a small town in Oregon. They said the town disappeared in 1972, but they were there now, and everything seemed normal except the dates kept changing. They asked if I knew what was happening. I did, and I was able to guide them out before they became trapped, before they spent years or decades displaced, believing they were serving a higher purpose when really they were just fuel for something hungry and ancient. That is why I am sharing this account, not just to tell my story, but to create a network, a community of people who understand that reality has cracks, places where time is not linear, locations where entities we cannot fully comprehend have learned to feed on human consciousness. If you are an investigator, a researcher, someone who explores the unexplained, please learn from my mistake. If you encounter a location where time feels wrong, where the dates do not match, where people speak of sacred sites and eternal vigils, do not investigate alone. Do not assume you can observe without participating. And most importantly, do not trust entities that claim you have been chosen for a special purpose. That is how they trap you. And if you are watching this because someone you know has disappeared while investigating the paranormal, do not give up hope. They may not be dead. They may be displaced, caught between moments, trapped in a temporal loop. But with the right knowledge, the right tools, the right help, they can be brought back. We proved that. 57 of us proved that. The world is stranger than we imagine. The boundaries between past, present, and future are thinner than we think. And there are things in the spaces between that have learned to exploit those thin places. But we can fight back. We can protect each other. We can share information and save lives. That is my mission now. That is why I am here, recording this account, sharing this truth. Not to frighten you, but to prepare you. Because the thin places are real. The predators are real. And the only weapon we have against them is knowledge. Thank you for listening. Thank you for believing. And please stay safe. Stay grounded. And if you ever find yourself somewhere that feels wrong, somewhere that exists in multiple time frames at once, somewhere that tries to convince you that you have been chosen for a great purpose, remember this account. Remember Jackson Reed and the 56 others who were trapped in Millbrook Falls. And get out. Get out before the singing starts. Get out before you lose yourself to the vigil. Get out before you become another name on the list of the disappeared. The boundary is not what you think it is, but now you know, and knowing might just save your life.